Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to cross the Øresund to Sjaelland in Denmark once again, and we're going to revisit a brewery that I haven't had anything from in about 2.5 years. Now this is a brewery that I rated very highly, but unfortunately I've just never come across their beers in that 2.5 year period, so it really is a shame because I always enjoyed the beers that I had from these guys. For this review we are going to head to a little place called Kirke, Hyllinge, which is quite close to Roskilde in the centre of Sjaelland, and we're having another beer from Hornbeer. This one is called the Fundamental Blackhorn. It comes in at 10% ABV and it's an Imperial Stout, and it's meant to be pretty good actually. This is a beer that has won a hell of a lot of awards, both in Denmark and further afield. So very curious to see how this one turns out. A big thank you to Matthias, who it was a friend of his actually that gave him this beer, and he said to me that I should do a review of this. So a big thank you to him for making this review possible. And as I always say, I hope you guys enjoy my take on this one. This is one of the kind of, this is a brewery that has a very good reputation in Denmark, and they were one of the very early craft breweries as well, from what I understand. So as I say, I'm looking forward to this one, and I hope you guys enjoy my take on it. So anyway, as is usual with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Hornbeer before. No doubt I will add some more in the fairly near future. There's all the usual social media. If you want to see more beer reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Danish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Hornbeer then. So as I've mentioned to you before, Hornbeer is a farmhouse brewery, and they come from Sjaelland in Denmark, and the company itself was founded back in 2008 by Gunhild and Jørgen Fogh Rasmussen. So the brewery itself can be found in the small town of Kirke, Hyllinge, not far from Roskilde, which in itself is a very pretty town. I was quite lucky and got to visit there for the first time just a couple of weeks back, and I highly recommend that to anyone who wants to go and visit Denmark. But Jørgen apparently was quite an avid home brewer for a good number of years, and Gunhild was also a big beer fan, so they decided to eventually turn his hobby into a profession and start their own company together. So their first brewery that they had was very small, and it could only produce small 300-litre batches, but in their first year their Caribbean rum stout that they made was named the best new beer in Denmark. 3 months after this brewery was founded though, the brewery building burnt down, and so they had to start completely from scratch. They set up a new brewery which opened very quickly actually, and thankfully saved the company in January of 2009. But these days they're producing over 2,000 hectolitres of beer per year, and they've got over 30 beers in their range, with many of those winning prizes. Gunhild apparently designs all of the labels that you'll find on the beer, so they do have a very distinctive kind of art on their beer labels, if you like. They're always very recognisable, these beers, and these days they're also exported to several countries worldwide, and the company at the moment is also aiming to make the production of their beers CO2 neutral. So, like many Danish companies, they are quite environmentally friendly as well. I've had a good few beers from these guys. The Caribbean Rum Stout is a lovely beer. I did have a very special one from these guys too, which was it was actually, they took it off the market because Russians hacked their website and things like that, and that was a lovely stout as well. I forget the name of it now. But this is a brewery that you definitely want to check out, and hopefully the next beer that I try from these guys will be an IPA or something from the lighter end of the spectrum, because if memory serves me correctly, it is mainly dark beers that I've reviewed from these guys so far. I know that it's basically been 3 Imperial Stouts that I've tried from them, so this is one that, so this brewery, I really need to try the lighter end of things. As I always say, if you want a measure of how good a brewery is, you need something from the lighter side of the spectrum and something from the darker side of the spectrums. But in my experience, these guys are very good when it comes to the dark side, so keep that in mind. But yeah, another one of the older and more established craft breweries in Denmark, and one that you definitely need to check out if you are a fan of the Imperial Stouts. I mean, along with Herr Fredriksson, Probably the Caribbean rum stout is one of the kind of pinnacle imperial stouts from Denmark, if you like, along with like Black Hole and the Beer Geek Brunch and things like that from Mikkeller. So yeah, definitely a brewery that you want to have a go at. But that's all you really need to know about Hornbeer for the moment. A very good Danish craft brewery. If you want to learn more about them, of course, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Untappd and Instagram, and that'll keep you up to date with all the latest goings on. The Untappd is particularly good for all the different beers that they've produced. But yeah, let's get on to the actual tasting of this beer itself then. So I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork then. You can see the little Blackhorn, the mole, popping his head up there with his sunglasses, enjoying a little bit of sun. But yeah, the artwork on this one is a little bit plain actually, a little bit minimalist compared to the other ones that you're going to get. Usually the artwork that you'll find on these bottles is very, very colourful, so this one is a little bit different actually. And it says on the side here, you could actually age this beer until 2022. So I could have kept this one for another 3 years, but Matthias was very keen to have a go at it. So it says here on the side, it's a heavy stout, 11% ABV. This beer is brewed with coffee malt, chocolate malt, black malt and honey. We've used hops to 120 IBU. It's dry hopped and it's matured on oak and walnut. Now we think it's matured enough. The taste, people that have tasted it say coffee, licorice, honey, oak and walnut, but try it yourself. The Fundamental Blackthorn was elected as the best beer to the beer festival in Valhall, Frederiksund in 2011, at Best Beer, the Stockholm Beer and Whiskey Festival in 2011, Best Danish Beer of 2011, greater than 6%, and silver at the World Beer Cup San Diego, California in 2012. The temperature should be around 12 to 15 degrees. Try it together with cheeses, blue cheeses or dark chocolate. So yeah, maybe do that when I take the rest of it upstairs to share with Matthias. But yeah, you know, it's pretty damn good. I like this. This is actually very similar to the Swedish saying. So if I put the Danish accent on, smaga also gott. So it's Danish is a little bit more throaty than Swedish. So basically that means that it's meant to taste pretty bloody good actually. So yeah, there is the Hornbeer bottle cap on this one. It's like a little Highland cow with a pig nose on it actually, which kind of always makes me laugh a little bit, the bottle cap for this one. But yeah, an 11% Imperial Stout. I think I told you a lie at the start of the video and said it was 10%, so my apologies for that, but nicely presented. So without further ado, let's get this guy out and we will get on with the tasting. I'm very curious to see how this one turns out. A little bit of smoke on the opening, but not all that much. So let's get it out and into the glass. And this is Black as Night. That's a lovely looking beer, that actually. So yeah, that should do for the moment. I'll leave the rest in because I am going to share this beer. So yeah, you can smell just how sweet this one is straight away actually, and I wonder if this will actually be a sweet stout, a sweeter Imperial Stout. As we say, we can always get the very roasty ones, you get the sweet ones, and then you get the more kind of brown sugary ones as well. So really curious to see how this turns out. But as you can see with this beer, and as you would expect, this is poured a very dark ebony rosewood, and I mean if I hold it up to the light, to be honest with you, it doesn't even have a little bit of a kind of Coca-Cola coloured edge to it, or a ruby edge. This is very, very dark, black as night, this beer. And I've poured roughly about half of it into my glass just now, so about 250 millilitres. This one is a half-litre bottle, and you could see that there was about a half finger of a frothy, very dark tan head actually. One or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, and a few little ones just heading up towards the bottom of that head there. But I mean, overall, it looks very, very nice. Nothing particularly surprising about this one in terms of its appearance. You know, I would guess that this beer would be hazy to a degree, but to be honest, without, you know, when you can't see through it, it's the completely wrong colour to see through this beer. But you know, nothing overly surprising about this one in terms of its appearance. It looks like a lovely Imperial Stout, and you know, I've always found with Imperial Stouts that when they've got nice dark heads like that, they tend to be pretty good. So I'm wondering if that hypothesis will kind of stand up for this beer. But knowing Hornbeer and how good they are at stouts, I'm pretty sure it will. So let's take a look at the aroma of this one and just see how we got on. Nothing overly surprising about the appearance. Oh, yeah. That smells really, really nice actually. This one, it's kind of interesting because it comes across both as being quite smooth and woody, but at the same time it's got a good bit of sweetness to it. I'm not sure what to make of that aroma actually. So I mean, underneath you can definitely smell the kind of woody qualities out of this. And you can smell that it's a little bit more complex than oak. You'll always find that when you age something on oak, it comes across as being very smooth and very vanilla-like, but you can smell that there's something different about that. I mean, I don't know if I've had beers aged on walnut before. I'm not sure how they would do that actually. Would they put walnut chips in it? Because I've never heard of barrels being made out of walnut. Walnut, from what I remember, always had a little bit of grains and grooves and stuff in it. I had, some of my guitars I think have got walnut walnut inlays and stuff like that on them, and I don't know how easy it is to make like a long plank or to make something out of a long plank of walnut. So I'm really curious as to how they would do that. Is it oak chips and walnut chips mixed into it? Not quite sure. Or it could be an oak barrel with walnut chips inside it. That's kind of an interesting thing to think about too. So that's one of the very unique things about this beer basically. So you can smell the walnutty characters. They're almost a little bit, to me it comes across as being a little bit wetter and almost a little bit more grassy and musky almost. That's how the walnutty side of the woody elements in this beer comes across. So just just pay attention to that. That's quite an interesting point about this beer. Mixed in with those woody elements though, you can definitely pick out a bit of that coffee smoothness in there. I mean, if it was just black malt that was added into this beer, it would be very, very roasty and toasty in its aroma, and it would be quite a sharp roasty and toasty quality. But when you add coffee beans and coffee malt to the beer, really the coffee just smooths that whole roastiness out actually. I'm a big fan of coffee stouts. Dugas Brewery in Sweden actually are one of the best coffee stout producers that I've come across, and I mean the Beer Geek brunch beers that you get from Mikkeller, of course, those are almost cult classics if you like when it comes to Danish craft beer. You can really smell the lovely smoothness in this one. To me, the coffee that's coming out of this one, and coffee beans can add a hell of a lot of complexity to a beer. The coffee notes that come out of this beer, it's quite roasted. There's a good bit of earthiness to it, but at the same time it does have a little bit of a sort of almost citrusy sharpness to it. The coffee elements that come out of this are earthy and roasty, but at the same time almost citrusy. Not really floral in my opinion, more citrusy. But that could be the hops that are giving that impression right enough, so take that comment with a pinch of salt. But lovely coffee smoothness to this one. You can smell the chocolate coming out of there as well. It's got this lovely, it's quite a high percentage cocoa chocolate as well. I would estimate like 70-80% cocoa. You can really get that out of there. There's maybe a little element of a milky chocolate in there as well, in fairness. Brown sugars, yeah, there is an element of brown sugar in there, definitely quite a syrupy treacle molasses. Not toasty, definitely just big oily and syrupy brown sugars in there as well. So I mean, there's a hell of a lot of aroma coming out of this one. They did say on the side that a lot of people said that it tasted and smelled of licorice. If I think about it, you get a little bit of that sort of aniseedy quality out of it. But to me, that wouldn't be... If I hadn't read the blurb and things like that, I'm not sure I would make that connection, to be honest. The licorice isn't overly prominent in this one, to be honest, for me. For me, it's a lot more about the woodiness, the coffee, and the chocolate and brown sugars, to be honest. The licorice isn't overly obvious, I don't think, in the aroma here. On the hoppy side of things, definitely a big earthy presence to this one. You can pick up a little bit of grassiness and floral quality, but the earthiness is quite prominent for me. I'd wonder if they've maybe used a little bit of English Fugel hops in here as well, but I suspect there will be a little bit of Williamette, just going by the fruity notes. And maybe Summit or something like this as well. It's always fun to play Guess the Hops with these beers, but on the fruity side of things, it's quite medicinal and phenolic. There is a little bit of that in here. So you've got some of these kind of pruny notes out of it. It doesn't quite have a raisiny sharpness or a plum sharp juiciness or anything like that. For me, it's quite pruny. A little bit of a kind of blackcurranty blackberry thing in there as well. And it's blackberries, prunes, not really raisiny, and it's not really got a kind of plummy sharpness or anything like that. So yeah, blackberries, blackcurrants, maybe a little touch of a figgy note in there, but at the same time it's quite medicinal and phenolic in its aroma as well. And I have to say, I've spent a lot of time talking about the aroma of this beer, but that's because it's one of the most complex aromas that I've come across in a little while actually. So this is one that I would say definitely take a little bit of time over and just enjoy it. But we're going to have a taste of this beer now and see how we get on. In terms overall with this beer, in terms of the Imperial Stout category, I'd say the aroma is pretty well balanced. It's got sweetness in there, it's got roastiness, but the roastiness is pretty smooth, as I was kind of alluding to earlier. But let's have a taste of this one now and see how we get on. This one is the Fundamental Blackhorn and Imperial Stout, either coming in at 11% or 10%. One thing says 10%, the little label on the back, but in the blurb it says 11%, so I'm not sure. Not going to make that much of a difference anyway, but an Imperial Stout from Hornbeer in Kirke, Hyllinge, just close to Roskilde in the centre of Sjaelland over in Denmark. Let's get stuck in. Slanje, skål, cheers, thank you to Matthias once again. Ooh, that's really unusual. I was expecting this one, going by the flavours, or the aromas rather, I was expecting this to lean towards the sweeter side of things, but I'll tell you something, this is a big, roasty, dry beast. This isn't what I was expecting from the aroma at all actually, and you know, you'll always find it's never in the middle. It's never in the middle with these beers. Either they smell pretty much, they taste pretty much exactly as you'd expect from the aroma, or they taste completely different. That's one of the really strange things about reviewing beers for you. I mean, it's either exactly as you expect it's going to be, or it's completely different. So, what I would say about this one is, when you've actually got the liquid on your tongue, it's very sweet, almost to the point where it's a little bit sharp actually, but then as it dries out and you go further into the aftertaste, that's where it starts to get really quite roasty and toasty. And that's one of the interesting things about this beer, it's just that transition to make. You take it in, it's a little bit sharp and fruity, it sweetens out a little bit on the malty side of things, and then in the aftertaste it really gets very, very roasty and toasty. So I mean, this is a very interesting Imperial Stout. It's got a hell of a lot of depth to it, so you know, if you get the chance to try this one, have a go at it. So for me, I would say, well, let's just think where to start with this beer. I mean, first of all, the thing you're going to notice about this beer is straight away you're going to feel those roasty black malts just forming the baseline of the beer. A bit on top of that, you do start to get that kind of coffee smoothness out of it, and that bitterness really pushes out the further that you go into the aftertaste. I mean, they did say that they hopped up the beer to be 120 IBUs. And there's a few things running through my head with that. It says that this beer is best before 2022. Now, I'm trying to remember whether Hornbeer say you can age their beers for 5 years or 10 years, because I would suspect this beer is either, if it says on the site here, 20 and 3rd of September 2022, this beer is either from September 2017, and I think that's more likely, to be honest, or it's from September 2012. So either it's been aged for 7 years or 3 years, roughly, or 2 years rather. I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure about that, in honesty. But that's one of the things that I should keep in mind when I'm tasting this beer, is that it has been, if it's got a 2022 date on it, it's probably 2017. I would think it's from. But I tell you something, it has died down a little bit and roasted really quite nicely. As I say, black malts there, some coffee smoothness on top of that. The coffeeness, again, to me, as I was picking up from the aroma, the coffeeness does come across as I was expecting. It's quite earthy, it's quite dark and roasty, but at the same time it does have a little bit of that aromaticity to it. You can kind of feel it punching its way out of the middle of your tongue, to be honest with you. In the very centre of your palate, it's almost like a blob in the centre of your tongue. You can feel those really dark, high percentage cocoa chocolates in there. It's like 80-90% cocoa, and that mixes well with the roasty black malt backbone that the beer has. In the very centre of your palate, in the very centre of your palate, you start to get the the brown sugars. And I mean, the interesting thing about the brown sugar is in the aroma, it comes across as being quite treacly and molasses, and I suspect that that's mainly down to the other ingredients that have been added to the beer. They did say they added honey to this one, but in the very centre of your palate, it's almost just a little bit biscuity, like a kind of caramel wafer type thing that comes out of this. You really can detect that little bit of sweetness there the further that you go into the aftertaste. And I mean, the further that you go into the aftertaste as well, for me, that's where these kind of woody notes come out. You can pick up a little bit of the smoothness from the oaky qualities, but I think it's that more musky, slightly rough flavour. I'm trying to think how to describe that slightly rougher, murky flavour that you're getting from the walnut, to be honest with you, that's coming out in this one. And that's sort of, it's almost like that's infused into the kind of roasty black malt and the coffee flavours that you're getting out of this beer as well. For me, this is one that's all about the aftertaste. It really is. That's where the big complexities start to come out of this beer. So yeah, this is one that you definitely need to try. And as I say, this one's been aged for either 2 years or 7 years, I'm not quite sure. In terms of the hoppy side of the beer then, back corners of the palate, you've got a lovely big earthiness to this one. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bit of English Fugel hops in here, because it does come across as being a little bit ashy, but at the same time, it could be something like American Summit or something like that they've added into this beer. In terms of the fruitiness, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Williamette as well, but a lovely big black, big dark earthiness to this one. That builds a good bridge with the black malt side of this beer. As you come further forward along the sides of the tongue, that earthiness does spread forward. It doesn't even become herbal, that earthiness lingers there, and then as you just reach the front corners of the palate, it just transits, makes that transition like that to become more floral. There's a good bit of a floral bite on the front corners of your palate, and if this beer is 2 and a bit years old, that's the kind of interesting point to make about this one, is that that hoppiness has stood up in this beer, in my opinion. Round the very front curve of your tongue though, it's a little bit lighter and grassy, but at the same time there is some floral elements kind of lingering around in there as well. And behind the front curve of the tongue, that's where you get that little oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters start to push their way out of the beer. And in the early part of the flavour from this one, you do get a little bit of sharpness in there. Now, I don't know if I would suspect that if this beer is 3 years old, it would have been kept dark. There could be a teeny little bit of oxidation in there, which can sometimes happen when you're cellaring beer. So maybe that's a little bit of the reason for the sharpness in this one. But in fairness, with the way the malt and stuff is holding up, I don't think that would be the case. I mean, the way that the malt and the hops are there, I think the hops would have dropped a hell of a lot more if there was light damage to this beer. But it does have, for me, it does have a real bit of sharpness in the beginning. It's almost the same level of tartness you would get from raspberries, from Scottish raspberries, which are notoriously known for being tart rather than mainland European ones, which are a little bit more juicy in my opinion. But you do get a little bit of that really sharp tartness out of this one. Yeah, and I would say there is a little bit of an almost raspberry-ish flavour there in the beginning. But then, so you get that sharpness as it comes in, and then it just kind of fades away a little bit. You do get a bit of that kind of raisiny sharpness in there as well. It's not quite straight up raspberry, I would say there's a tiny little bit of that. So you get a sharp, almost raspberry flavour. It becomes raisins almost quite quickly, and then the further that you go into the aftertaste, it gradually makes that transition over to being kind of figgy and almost like a little bit like blackberry, blackcurrant kind of things. But I'd say it's mainly a red fruity quality that's there. That sort of raisiny sharpness does linger in the aftertaste for quite a while, and then you're getting all these roasty and black malt and coffee-ish sort of flavours pushing out of the beer as well, and that earthiness lingers there the whole time too. So I mean, in terms of the general Imperial Stout spectrum, if you like, this is a very roasty, toasty one, and that wasn't what I expected from the aroma. I was expecting this one might be quite sweet, to be honest with you, so how wrong was I on that? But this is a lovely, lovely beer, this one. I know how good this brewery are, Imperial Stouts. The Caribbean Rum Stout, if you want something a little bit sweeter, that's one that you definitely want to have a go at. If you want something that's a little bit more roasty and toasty, if you're a fan of the Russian Imperial Stouts, for example, this is one that I think you will quite enjoy. Could this one fit into the Russian Imperial Stout category? possibly it could, to be honest with you. It's maybe right to describe this one as a Russian Imperial Stout. But I mean, we can talk about styles all day. The main thing is that it's a bloody good beer, and it's cool to return to this brewery after 2.5 years. I can't believe it's been so long since I had a look at the Caribbean Rum Stout. So I mean, have a go at this one for yourself and see what you think. If you like your stouts roasty and toasty, you are going to enjoy this one. In terms of the mouthfeel then, yeah, pretty mid. No, this is full bodied. It's the bottom end of full bodied, this one. Carbonation is pretty smooth. This one for me actually has quite a wet mouthfeel compared to some of the other Imperial Stouts that I've come across, and particularly, you know, I've always regarded Danish Imperial Stouts as being very thick in their mouthfeel. This is definitely one of the ones that's a little bit lighter, to be honest with you, and wetter in its mouthfeel, which is a bit of a surprise, especially when I consider the other Hornbeer ones. But I mean, the water quality in Denmark, they don't really have mountain water because it's a very flat country generally, but that's just an interesting point to make about this one, is that this one to me does feel wetter genuinely compared to other Danish Imperial Stouts that I've had. In terms of bitterness out of this one, you know, you're only ever going to be able to detect 100 IBUs on your tongue, but they're saying they've hopped this one up to 120. It is a big bitter beast, and you're pretty much, your palate is going to be saturated with the level of hoppy bitterness that you get out of this one, and that's 100 IBUs. So as they say, 120 IBUs in calculation, 100 IBUs in practice. It is a big bitter beast, this one, and that's both from the roastiness and from the earthiness in the hops, though, and a bit of the coffee as well. Those are the three things that will contribute to that. The middle of your palate, very roasty and toasty. You do get a little bit of sweetness out of it in the beginning, and the woody flavours kind of just smoothen it out a little bit, the smoothness from the oak, but then the walnut, I think, is a slightly drier flavour almost on the fruity side of things. It gets a little bit juicy in the aftertaste, it's a bit sharp in the beginning, so it's a very interesting beer, this one. Compared to other Imperial Stouts that I've had, this one is, you know, completely different, but it's been a very enjoyable beer to try for you, and like I say, glad to try something from Hornbeer, and I do hope I can have a go at some of their lighter beers, the IPAs and stuff like this at some point, because it's been all dark beers from what I've reviewed from them so far. Pardon me, when I think about it, yeah, I think it is all dark beers that I've had from these guys before. But I mean, a beautiful beer, this one. If you like your Russian Imperial Stouts, you'll enjoy this. If you like your Imperial Stouts more roasty and toasty, this is one that's going to tick the boxes for you. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this. This one is the fundamental Blackhorn, an Imperial Stout, either at 10% or 11% from Hornbeer in Kirke, Hyllinge, near Roskilde in the middle of Sjaelland in Denmark. A beautiful beer, this one, and one that I definitely think you should check out if you get the chance. I can see immediately, you know, I can see straight away why this one has won so many awards, and it deserves it. So another kind of iconic Imperial Stout, I guess, from Denmark, and one that I hadn't come across before. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this review then. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Hornbeer as well, and I hope you've enjoyed my take on this one. This one has been a little bit of a longer review, but I hope you've enjoyed it nonetheless. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer, and check out my social media and all of these kind of things, and make sure you try some of the Hornbeer beers if you haven't already. So thanks again for watching, and I will catch you guys soon. The fundamental Blackhorn from Hornbeer in Kirke, Hyllinge near Roskilde on Sjaelland in Denmark. Slanje, skull, cheers, thanks for watching.